Hello. Hello, good evening. Hello. Uh, yes, and welcome to my first ever solo public poetry reading. So, I just popped in early because I'm trying to navigate the features of this Facebook by Poets in Pajamas. So, I will be starting my reading, the introduction first, in about 4 minutes. And hopefully, we could have some folks to roll in the session. And I hope to head over their comments right after I read my poems in 30 minutes or so. And by the way, I know you're wondering why I'm sporting a mask. Look right here, because I just had my dental procedure session uh, the other day, okay? And I had my tooth extraction, just to be specific. I had my front tooth removed. That's why I'm wearing a mask. Not because I'm protecting myself from COVID or Delta or Omicron, whatever. But I'm just sporting a mask because of my dental procedure. I visited my dentist last Friday. It's already my second session. And hopefully by next week, I will have my front tooth replaced. And yes, in 2 minutes, we're going to start. I hope to see pop-ups, but right now I'm not seeing anything on my screen. By the way, my reading is divided into two parts. The first one, I'm going to read poems from my unpublished manuscript. I have a new unpublished collection, and I chose two poems from that collection, and I'm glad to be sharing the poems with you. And the other part of the reading session, I'm going to read published works. Some of them got published from literary journals, academic journals, and from my books right here. Okay. And right after I read some of these published and unpublished work, I'm going to respond to your comments about perhaps writing, the creative process, aesthetics, um, what else? Or maybe some relevant issues or issues encountered in the process of writing. Okay? Or maybe about my influence, my literary influence. Who am I reading right now? And what are the books that I'm reading in the past couple of days? Okay? And I guess we're live, and I'm about to introduce myself. All right, so it's already 7 p.m. and it's morning here in my country in the Philippines. You can hear chicken crows from outside, right? And it's also raining, okay, in my area here. So, good evening, and in my place it's already Monday morning. So, I am Lawdenmarc, Decamora. Um, I used to be called Mark. My name is a bit long, so they just call me Mark or LD, or by my nickname LD. And I started writing poetry way back in college. I used to join workshops, writing workshops, and happened to publish some of my poems, even short stories, in little magazines. So we have magazines here in the Philippines, and then I also publish my work internationally, like in Singapore, in some Asian journals, and then in the U.S. And I started writing way back in college, and then I started writing seriously and got to publish my work in some big journals way back in 2012. So right after college, I took writing as a career right before I took up my MFA in poetry. So I started writing poems about about my favorite sport, about my favorite music, and of course even a favorite subject in philosophy or even other radical literary genre or movement like surrealism, imagism, and other subjects that are my favorite topics. Even materials that are metaphysical or materials that have something to do with the social political discourse or cultural significance about my country or maybe about writing in general. Sometimes there is also politics and aesthetics and aesthetics in politics. So yeah, those are my favorite subjects. I write them because I used to write those subjects because I believe I can extract more inspiration and images from those subjects. And whenever I write, I used to see that there is a trajectory or a direction, some kind of a pattern when it comes to writing poems. Because if there is no pattern, if there is no direction, I don't think my writing will succeed. But of course, I avow or I also acknowledge those poetic movements that thrive on carelessness. Okay, they thrive on recklessness, carelessness. I also avow or accept those um, poetic philosophies. But in my style of writing, I need to have a trajectory. I need to have a pattern or a map so I can better manipulate the signs or even the shape and form of my writing. Okay, and then of course later on the context. Okay, so yeah, I have an MFA, and then I got to publish my work internationally. I am also a serious vinyl collector. Since I love music, I used to draw my inspiration from indie music, local and international. And my favorite aesthetic subject is surrealism. And I used to read uh, older works from Hart Crane, yeah, Hart Crane, the French surrealist poets like Paul Elward, okay, and even Breton, okay, and then of course Dean Young, okay, um, and then I also teach, yeah, I also teach literature subjects in college here in the Philippines. I teach humanities. Usually, my area of specialization is around art studies. Okay, I used to explore postmodernism and uncover the realities and appearances of art with postmodernism and other artistic and other radical artistic movements. Okay, and lately, um, I started reviewing and rereading some of my favorite journals in surrealism, like Survision. Survision. I used to follow the issues published by Survision. I think it's I think it's being published in Ireland. Okay, it's one of my favorite surrealist journals. Um, and then I follow the issues of and Survision, and then I also like the short poems of Margarita Serifimova from Bulgaria and other international poets because of the way they treat their subject with poetic elan, and of course the images and the music being incorporated in their work. So I that's one way on how I write my poetry because of those major and contemporary influences. Okay, and I live in the Philippines, and I've been published in more than 23 countries, but usually I only send out individual poetic pieces, and then I already have two books. The first one was published in 2020, and the latest was last year. The first one was Tunnels, and the one that was published in the US by Atmosphere Press is Love Air. And I have a new collection, but it's still unpublished. And I'm going to read some of those some poems from that unpublished collection, as well as poems from my published book. And just 2 months, just this June, 2 months ago, I also got the opportunity to publish my first micro chapbook with Ghost City Press in New York. And the title of that micro chapbook, it's in PDF, it's online. I believe it's available online, and I hope to get a copy soon and have it delivered here. The title of the micro chapbook, by the way, is Dream Minerals 1. It has that pink cover with cars in it, and I'm grateful that one of my poet friends contributed the image or the cover for that micro chapbook. Okay, I have two full-length books and one micro chapbook. I think it's time for me to start reading some of my poems. And I'm going to start with my unpublished manuscript. Wait a minute. I'm using my phone because it's still an unpublished work, and I took a photo of the poems a while ago. So here we go. The title of this unpublished poem is Ode to Creeping Charlie as Gossip. So this poem is coming from a new collection of mine. The title of this new manuscript is Line Affairs. Line Affairs sounds like love affair, but I changed it to Line Affairs because I want to focus on the poetic line, the art of the poetic line. So it's Line Affairs. And in that unpublished collection, you will see a lot of experimental work, a lot of rhizomic, pluralistic signs and poetic lines, and other poetic properties or requirements that we use to learn from our poetry classes or even poetry workshop. Those terms, you know those terms, right? pacing, poetic lines. Okay, and then yeah, here we go. I'm going to start now. Ode to creeping Charlie as gossip. Bright stolons of shape stalk the corner of my eye. Far away eastward, there are sad details of the truth. Maybe some far away further you. Too funny your leaves grow and stay long before my eyes were amazed by your friendship with wet lies gurgling with charm, which like poison you spread so rhizomic in the dark first. To contemplate facts in the soil or something becoming plural to understand human happiness. We believe in the ordinary and obscure touch of your story. Tender, tender at the start, dangerous to the finish. We are in the same dirt as historians carrying meaningful narratives to the sun, risking ferns and facts to be read correctly in late summer. A garden of weeds, of shiny green foliage engaging social memory with scalloped edges. Shadows of marites are eating up the lawn, full of gossip buried in their colonial tongues. And it's a shame that we can't talk things personal and subterranean in times like today when the world's flowering with hashtags and fugazis. So it's just a short poem that talks about the hypermediality of the social media, of the internet, or even of the issues that we get from exploring social media, like digital disinformation, misinformation, the spread of fake news. And then I also mentioned here a native or colloquial word like marites, which in our language means a gossiper. Okay, a gossiper. Because here the poem talks about merely fake news. Okay, fake news that's fake news that is about to kill historical facts or historical data. So it's very crucial, especially when we talk about history, when we talk about digital disinformation. So how we differentiate historical facts from fake news. Okay, especially in the culture of the internet, in the culture of social media, it's a crucial thing to uh, to talk about these things, especially if you're lacking research. That's why in the poem I made mention of colonial tongues, also of becoming plural, because the poem was also influenced by Deleuze and Guattari, my favorite French philosophers and psychoanalysts. So, yeah, the news, of course, obviously, are the news information, of course, is obviously rhizomic. They're like vines, they're like the weeds, they're like the creeping Charlie. That's why there is a comparison of fake news with weeds. The philosophy of news or information as to compare it with fake news or new information that is really untruthful or lacking research. So that's the core issue here. Okay, that's the problem of the poem. Okay, so it's really problematizing on gossip. Okay, and in the popular lexicon of some neighborhood or village people, Marites used to spread fake news because they use it for pastime. They and they are also maybe somehow they're intimidated by facts. That's why they lack time. If it's not about the issue of time, maybe it's their patience. Why they don't take research. So that's the issue here. That's the issue being problematized in this poem. So it's really about historical facts as being replaced by fake news, especially in the digital age. Okay, and then the next poem that I'm going to read is called "The Last Kiss," and this is a war poem, and it's my response to the ongoing war. I believe it's still ongoing, the war in Ukraine, and also the tension in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea that involves my country, the Philippines, Taiwan, and China. Of course, China. And then, of course, the US. So those are the major parties in that maritime territorial conflict. And of course, this poem is a response to those violence and war conflicts, okay, happening both in Europe and in Southeast Asia or somewhere in the Pacific. So the last kiss, and I have envisioned here two major characters, excluding the poetic persona. So the poem is dedicated to Mr. and Mrs. Karchenko driving past the port city of Odessa. So here we go. The last kiss. At 4 a.m., vegetables are going to be delivered, but no market destination yet. My stomach sags with old food in this long day trip from yesterday's nightmare to this recovery your mother signs with anonymity. These wrinkles on the face are nothing but fattening asparagus wired to my brain's street map of indeterminacy, visible horizon glowing my hair to be gray and still. I hope I care for another season. This tunnel cares so much about mobility and personal crisis. It does. It's the reason why we deliver dried oreganos or life and death safely from point to point, why in express we smell home. I stay alive though, sensing velocity as an ambulance would in a dream, brisk, accidental. Remember the first time your little bones cried for milk? The tank's turquoise lights, I detest our eyes. The remaining light so imperial to touch the end. The remaining skin of distance, my alabaster bed, wards dissolving to onion molecules, not dying as I am the same boy my mother used to kiss. My body remembers. The goods are safe, and I feel a likeness veined in marble upon marble of my hopes for you. As long as you're here entering tunnels with me, stuck to our old Sinatra on the stereo, I'll have no problem closing my eyes in this eternity of 4 a.m. So that's The Last Kiss, a response to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. And this poem is, of course, dealing with loss, love, and, of course, struggle. So those are the general themes of the poem. And what's interesting about this work it's it's thriving on imagination. It used to make sense of the light as if it's following the as if it's following an ambulance. So the light used to follow footsteps or even shadows of the couple. So here you can see the light as like a watchtower, um, something of something like a panopticon. So the light here is sovereign. The light here is being detested by the mournful eyes of the speaker, because the poetic speaker here mourns for the struggle and the loss of the couple. That's why I added drama in the last stanza of the poem. And I used to retain the image of the 4 a.m. emergency. Yeah, that's the 4 a.m. Emergency. The couple was inside um, a car, and then they're delivering goods from one place to another. But because of of the war, because of some images like tanks, like javelins, um, they're struggling with their usual chores. That's why um, the light here is being detested by the mournful eyes of the poetic persona or speaker. So anyway, that's the idea behind this poem. It's just my poetic response, aesthetic response to war. Um, and then also there's also images of war. Of course, we tend to romanticize them, just like in the last stanza, old Sinatra on the stereo. So there you go. So there's drama, there's separation, of course loss, and then the sense of emergency, especially when we get the connection of the first stanza and the last stanza. The 4 a.m. emergency serves as an image, a powerful image in the poem. So I retain the 4 a.m., that duration, from the first stanza to the last stanza, just to add vigor, drama in the poem. And then let's get playful this time with my third poem. Yeah. So this is a ludic invitation to to um, to a medical crisis. Okay, like COVID, like its variants, Delta, Omicron, and wrote this poem as a product of my Tupilo 3030 project participation. So the title of the poem is The Vaxxer's 21st Century Anti-Language Fomance. Okay, and basically the approach of this poem is visual. Uh, you will be able to enjoy it, of course, with the sound, but at the same time, the visual, the visuality of the poem is also of note. Um, and then this poem is long because it's divided into two parts. Okay. Um, so for us to appreciate the poem, it's really about taking a gander at the visual sense of the poem. But of course, I will also demonstrate how the sound incorporates some kind of an acumen or insight, because it's all about COVID. it's all about um, it's all about uh, it's all about our defense as well as our response to to COVID, and how we accept um, such a crisis um, in our everyday lives. So, the Vaxxer's 21st century anti language formats, wrestling with words, wrestling with shadows of youth, wrestling with pain through the flood waters, wrestling with echoes and booyaka trees, wrestling with VIP treatments, na 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 na, wrestling with your non distant magnetic ultramarine philosophy, wrestling with heightened quarantine restrictions, wrestling with language, starting with Basque and RX escapism, and monsoon, alliteration, addiction, silence, sickness of Le Champion, wrestling with pixie risk, wrestling with COVID and its poverty ward, its bastard child Delta, etc., etc. Wrestling with the ambassadress of 619 mood pageantry, wrestling with brand politics, Pfizer, Sinovac, AstraZeneca, plank, 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 I'm fully vaxxed with your left-handed kindness. That's the first part. And here's the second part. The second part is in a form of a multiple choice, just like a test questionnaire. That's why it's better to appreciate this when you take a look at its visuality. Sequencing or such a genome can make our lives aflutter with repairable three boxes of considerable options. To choose from the following, and yet so prismatic are my hinted clues winking at your Hail Mary threes. Number one, peer through the door scope. Reality on mute. Quarantined. Number two, you like it? As if it would spare the lexicon of your TV cabron. Three, discuss how many ways are there to submit to medication. Over the top rope, I quit, via pinfall or submission. And while I cannot arrange the squares of your soul, the glinting hexagram splice gently into a midterm ultrasonic fuse to be your likely firstly first, select from 2. Erasing the love scene of unsplitting 3 and 1. 3. However, you think you can wrestle science? 1. Science takes the shape of an Olympic gold medal. So you see, we can exact things and lift them and read them and finally say something beyond our spherical undulations. Hopefully, I count, nominate, radically tally you through. 3. Love elliptical and electrical love. 2. We are escapist, escapism, escape. 1. Or this vaccinated site, we're very busy people. So that's the poem all about. It's about vaccination. It's all about the COVID, the response to COVID, and at the same time, it's also covering some wrestling maneuvers, because as as coping with COVID, we have to we have already demonstrated our own struggle when it comes to coping with COVID. Okay, and that's why I made a comparison between wrestling and the way we react to COVID. Okay, and the way we also react against those vaccines. Okay, because of the brand politics behind vaccination. uh, we receive different vaccines, especially in our country. We receive different vaccines from different companies. So that's how we react against brand politics, because of the different vaccines we receive and because of how we deal with COVID. Okay, so we're really wrestling with um, with COVID, and we're also wrestling with its own language. The language of science, the language of COVID is difficult. Just like when you write a poem, composition for me is taxidermy. It's about, it's all about arranging the space, the signs. It's really difficult. So it's like also dealing with COVID. So that's the poem all about. Okay, that's why the poem has a long title as well, and it's very specific with the images, like the Vaxxers 21st Century Anti-Language Fomance. Okay, and then I also did mention some wrestling maneuvers and uh, some wrestling jargons like I quit match, those things. Okay, and then the fourth one is a poem from my first book called Tunnels. So my fourth poem that I'm going to read for you is Tunnel Number 4. So Tunnel Number 4 is from the series called Tunnels, which is part of this book. It's the first section of this book. So Tunnel Number 4, Clark Freeport Amnesia. Good morning, Spine. Out there, stilt houses look serious and fine. Here we live in echoes, simply spelling the past. I've been told by your sister that your dad's growing old in Kampong, the sting of war now stacks up misery. His farewell letter on the drawer, just sleeping soundly. Cars driven to drive ego away and further into a port of somewhere. Dead batteries tested, windshield washed clean, ready to shelter no rain. Even the 17th fly coming to feel your spine, your shoulder blades, the twin tunnels, the rising Tukyung. I'm a mess. I need to go somewhere else. The roads, oh, they paved for your courage. Road signs newly painted, though they're sick to death of neon. Spine, I wake up early to catch not the sun but the careful subtext of your hips, telling me that there's not a day brighter than your special scrambled eggs. We seek explanations. We carry flags. Please remember to feed the cat, as ordinary conversations may sink if your head's going from point to point, tropical to jazz. Please remember your name's Spine, and your dad's gonna call you his baby and return to change this place into a forest of Khmer flowers. But you say you're not Spine and wasn't born so yesterday. Tell you what, your real name's Soul, and you continue to move places, ports and bases, Los Angeles, nowhere, Clark Freeport somewhere, poetry in our plains and our roots. And you were born in 1987, in the late 60s, at the end of the century, in a time of lit hysteria of the mind, and I was born right next to you. So that's Tunnel Number 4, Clark Freeport somewhere, from this book, Tunnels. So just a backstory of the poem. This poem is about two people exchanging letters during the time of war, and then it's really a love story of two people living from two different countries, and they're also struggling because of communication, also because of the pangs of war, And then I used to, I'm also inspired by Emily Dickinson when I wrote this poem because of how she treats capitalization. So if you're going to read the poem, there are some words or terms that are being capitalized. They're capitalized because I want to put emphasis on on a particular subject. Okay, because this subject has its own reality, not just because of his or her own appearance, but also a context to explore. That's why there are some capitalizations in the poem, like soul and spine. So, what's the connection between soul and spine? And that's also I learned from surrealism. There is dissociation. There's dissociation, but the story must be uh, must be whole, even though signs and images um, are a bit, otherworldly, and images are dissociated. Still, there is a connection between and among those images because of the constellation of reality, the constellation of reality that the story provides. And in this poem, there is a story to tell because it's about war, because it's about two people exchanging letters, and it's like a tale of two um, countries. Okay, one is living in Cambodia, yeah, because Kampong Klayang is in Cambodia, and the other is living in the Philippines. Okay, so that's the story about Tunnel Number 4, Clark Freeport Amnesia. And then the last poem that I'm going to read, yes, is, wait, just give me a second. Okay, so the last poem that I'm going to read, sorry for the caesura, okay, or for that poetic pause, if you want to call it. Yeah, is Philippines, the country where I'm from. Um, this poem is a forthcoming piece in Mantis Journal of Stanford University, and I'm glad to be sharing it with you. So I'm just going to tell the story of this poem right after I read it. Okay, so I'll read it first. Philippines. There are 7,107 islands of indeterminacy in the Far East. My country seems to float on a giant coconut shell where there is no excuse to not be busy for it's the texting capital of the world. That's what's been said on record. And I recall 7-Eleven for being the miniature NYC to our videoke bars, massage parlors. Don't you know that reportage is a heavenly outcome of the tropics? Sleepless lovers are about to take on their neon sabbatical in the streets, hungry mouths fed by psalms and promises. Time and again, some pained like academics dwelling on their etherized research plans, rethinking discourse on the head of a pin. Boxing legend Manny Pacquiao could have been the ambassador of the Republic of Speed and Sentimentalism. The young bloods, too, may have debunked cultural stereotypes with probiotic drinks. A 1-2 punch to Filipino time as Manila traffic takes the shape of an Olympic gold medal. What about selfies and birit singers? Oh, they're all passions setting fire to the world using only the butane of their inspired buoyant souls. And nurses, nurses, the forever crowned kings and queens of diaspora, how heroic, how proud and ambulant. This is the this is the painted feeling when you place optimism in the oven and it doesn't get burned, or the fantasy of reading love poems to frontliners in times of uncertainties, the digital ferryman of drugs and fake news. My country is a paradise. It is a paradise. It is paradise. Come see death and poverty in their twilight gown. So that's Philippines. And the way I write the title is in APA transcription or translation, transcription, whatever. It's not the simple Philippines, but it's an APA transcription. Because I want to emphasize here, not exaggerate, but only to emphasize the complication of information being received by people, especially when they communicate with people. Sometimes they lack research. Sometimes they just believe in hearsay. That's why in the first stanza I started with facts. Like there are 7,100 islands of indeterminacy in the Far East. And then another fact is my country is the texting capital of the world. So I started with facts. And then in the middle of the poem, you will get to know the playfulness as well as the experimentation of the speaker in the poem. And the speaker here tries to recall the dilemmas from the socio-political issues of Filipinos to their cultural achievements, like how nurses, like how athletes bring glory to the country. Even entertainers like Birit singers. I've mentioned Birit singers here. Those powerful singers. They sing with enough prowess. Okay, we call it Birit. So, from cultural development to the economic fiasco, they're all mentioned in the poem. That's why I started with facts in the first stanza, and in the last stanza, it's all about, it's something of a commentary. Come see, I mentioned there, come see, I think, yeah, come see death and poverty in their twilight gowns. Okay? How can we connect twilight gown to death and poverty? Is it are they dissociated? Are they completely detached from the appearance of the images or the subject being mentioned? So I don't know. Okay, my pattern here is just to connect the reality or the factual statement of the first stanza with the commentary. I want it connected. I want to connect facts with the commentary, and the commentary is explored in the last stanza, and then in the middle of the poem, some, how do you call it, litany, some litanies of a litany of the social issues encountered of mostly Filipinos here and abroad. Okay, they struggle not only with work, but also with language. That's why here in the poem, there are some exophonic elements. I tend not to use pure English, but I used to incorporate some native words because of its exophonic feature. Because yeah, some of the players here also struggle with language, communication, not because of technology, not because of social media, but because of how language also is evolving. They have to um, to accept the development of language. Okay, and of course its reality and appearances. Okay, so that's the last poem. Okay, I already read 5 poems, and I'm hoping to see comments on Facebook or maybe questions. You can ask me about writing. You can ask me about the poems that I've read, or maybe my forthcoming um, poetic pieces, because some of them are already taken by literary journals. Once again, those who just joined our reading session, I'm wearing a mask because of my dental procedure or operation. Uh, I had my front tooth removed 2 days ago. I'm sorry, I cannot remove my mask. Okay, because it's so awkward. Okay. Okay. Let me now go over the comments. Okay. I hope my audio is clear, or the way I speak. Okay. Do I have a clear audio register because I'm wearing a mask? Anyway, I'm just read your comments because it's almost 8 o'clock. Okay, I'm now going over the comment section. Oh, yeah, thanks for the plaudits. Okay, love these lines and imagery. Thank you, thank you. I hope to read some more, but it's almost 8 p.m. But yeah, I guess it's right to be taking up your comments. Wait. Okay, there's a question right here. Okay, I'm very thankful we have right here from one of our viewers. Are there Filipino poets or artists that inspire your own process? Of yes, um, I mentioned in my introduction that I participated in several workshops, and most of our panelists in the workshop are of course academicians, if not full-time writers, they're academicians. They're coming from the institutionalized department, uh, like in the university, like in the MFA program. Uh, if I will be mentioning names, yes, like Mark Kayana, like Dina Roma, they became my professors and thesis mentors in my MFA. Yeah, they inspired my writing process. Yeah, they're my kababayans, they're my mentors. Okay. Oh, thank you for okay, appreciating the lines from the last poem. Come see death and poverty in their twilight gowns. I want to end the poem with that imagery. Okay, because I started with facts about the Philippines, and then I want to end it with a commentary. Of course, in a playful or poetic way. Okay, and then there's another question right here. Can you talk more about your forthcoming themes? Oh yeah, I mentioned earlier that I have an unpublished manuscript. It's called Line Affairs. Line Affairs. Instead of Love Affair, I I changed it to Line Affairs. So it's a collection of poems exploring the poetic line, the art of the poetic line. So you can see there poems um, of course, the usual experimentation, the usual rhizomic lines, and I also have some inventions there, like I used to call it what's that? Exponent poetry. I don't know if some other poets have done that, but I used to call it exponent poetry. Um, I'm using exponents in every poetic line of a whole poem, okay, and not just for visual effect, but also to make sense of, of space and shape. Okay, how how some people used to see art. Sometimes, for some people, especially coming from different schools of thought, they see art as meaningless because it's only an arrangement of shape and space. So in my exponent poetry, it's the same thing. I'm just paying attention or giving premium to the shape and the space of every poetic line. Okay, because there is a pacing or movement or velocity to be uh, to be considered or to be regarded. So I call it exponent poetry. And some of the poems of my exponent poetry were already published, like in Cordite in Australia, and just this April, the Columbia Review published one of my exponent poems. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's the theme of my new collection. Hopefully, some publishers will uh, will accept it. Okay, so that's the theme. It's all about the poetic line, and then of course, it also concerns some relevant contexts or issues. But the focus merely is on the poetic line, because if you discuss the poetic line, it will right away um, direct you to some issues, because the poetic line keeps on branching out. Okay, so it's becoming plural. Yeah, it's so rhizomic, like Deleuze and Guattari uh, observed. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So that's my forthcoming. Um, no, it's not forthcoming because it's not yet accepted. It's only a new manuscript or a new collection. Okay, looking for a publisher. I only have two books. Okay, Love, Air, and Tunnels, and then one chapbook. So yeah, thank you, Arlene, for that question. Okay, because I really want to explore the poetic line, like how James Longenbach, if my memory serves me well, yeah, James Longenbach uh, does it in his essay, in his poetics. Okay, so I want to explore the poetic line. That's why I use the title Line Affairs. Okay, so are there any more questions? And then when you talk about themes of my work, I usually write about surrealism. Yeah, I've been following Sur Vision magazine, and of course some poets from Bulgaria, like Margarita Serifimova. I'm a fan of her short surrealist poetry, sorry. And then, of course, the magazine's revision. Magazine like Duende. What else? Yeah. Because there are magazines that are theme related, right? Sometimes they are theme related. So I used to follow those magazines. Okay, I guess that's it. It's almost 8 p.m. And thank you for listening to my first ever solo public reading. The last time I've read my work, I was with other folks. Yeah, I read my poems in Asia Pacific, APWT, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, and in CLA of Cambodian Arts Literary Association 2 years ago. So this is my first ever solo reading. And I'm thankful that Poets in Pajamas gave me the opportunity to read works from my new collection and works from my published collection. So that's it. Have a lovely and restful weekend. Maraming salamat. Bye. Thank you.